This is going to be a really fun experiment with the YouTube algorithm, trying to make a video about porn and murder. So from now on, I will be referring to the terrifying keyword as pornography, so that I don't get shadow banned. A24's X, which is the fourth feature from director T. West, is a gruesome, squeal-inducing X-rated horror with echoes of Tobe Hooper's original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and 80s campsite slashes. X feels like a much older and simpler film than its so-called elevated contemporaries. It doesn't fall into the popular but overwrought category of trauma horror or deal with heavy-handed metaphors. But despite appearances, there is plenty of depth to this 70s set tale of young pornographers heading to the Deep South to make a movie together. As on-screen camera operator RJ, played by Owen Campbell, lets us know, it is possible to make a good, dirty movie. And West isn't afraid to let the decapitations and dicks do the talking.
I see one goddamn fucked up horror picture.
The film lines up Martin Henderson as Wayne, an imperturbable horn producer, as he brings along his young filmmaking troupe that includes fresh-faced scream queens Mia Goth and Jenna Ortega, along with Brittany Snow and rapper Kid Cudi. Together, the budding artistes travel to an isolated farm to make their sordid picture, with dreams of breaking into the big time as real-life films like Deep Throat did in the early 70s. Maxine, played by Mia Goth, believes herself destined to be a star, repeating her mantra over and over. She will not accept a life she does not deserve. But no sooner than the fun begins, so do the grisly kills, with farm owner Howard and his wife Pearl dead set on punishing the young pornographers for their youthful arrogance and sexual exploits. Aside from its background commentary on the American dream, or the question of lowbrow versus high art cinema, X turns its focus to yearning for long since past youth and the entrapment of aging, and the trials of elderly sex. For my money, the most important aspect of the film is this examination of age, beauty, and elderly sexuality, explored most explicitly through the wizened Pearl. The brilliantly twisted but sympathetic Pearl pushes the audience to evaluate what truly horrifies them most. And the film has divided some people on whether or not it continues to advance negative stereotypes surrounding age, and in fact contributed to demonizing the elderly itself. But I think X acts more so as a warning. Pearl and Howard aren't there just to scare us, because they are us. T. West asks us to look inward and forward simultaneously, and I believe he applies just the right amount of empathy when dealing with them to prevent Howard and Pearl from feeling like soggy cardboard villains. Soggy. Hagsploitation, a quasi-academic combo of hag and exploitation, is a term seemingly first coined in 2014. I couldn't find an earlier use of the word, but if you know of one, feel free to correct me. It's not a clearly defined concept, but it usually refers to when unstable older women play the antagonistic role, their age and appearance playing on the inherent distaste of the audience for a woman of a certain age. The exploitation of elderly women is a trope long held within the genre of horror, and it's had somewhat of a rise in recent years with films like The Visit, Hereditary, and Barbarian. Even Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was deriving scares from an elderly woman's body being on show. What tends to be the most commonly cited film in the genre is 1962's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which relies particularly on the audience's awareness of Bette Davis's somewhat departed glamour and beauty. As Baby Jane, she is powdered dry, the lines on her face cracking and creasing, the dark and heavy makeup used to emphasize her slowly sagging features, an intense contrast to Bette Davis's own youthful beauty. This is a tactic that Ty West, and yes, I've called him T West for the whole rest of the video, employs with subtlety. As major spoilers ahead, Mia Goth plays not only the stunning young Maxine, but also donned full body prosthetics in order to play the 80-plus-year-old Pearl. Where the casting might be misconstrued by some as a simple gimmick, it is core to the message of the film. And while some viewers might not even realize they're watching Goth in two roles, this dual casting sets up what is at stake for both characters. Pearl viewing Maxine with a sense of envy as she represents what she too once had, and Maxine viewing Pearl as what she may one day become, which is not necessarily a fear based in Pearl's physical appearance, but in her circumstance. Maxine sees herself as a star worthy of an extraordinary life, but the pictures in Pearl and Howard's hallway of Pearl dressed in ballet gear showed that she too once saw herself this same way. I'm not going to get too much into Pearl's past, but doubling down on this comparison, Ty West's prequel Pearl, which came out shortly after the original film, explores her story in more detail. It's clear after viewing both films that the similarities in Maxine and Pearl are more than just physical. And though Pearl also battles with darker desires to hurt people that Maxine doesn't seem to have, both women have a focus on stardom and a self-assuredness that they are special. But the horrifying reality that Maxine faces in observing Pearl is that she was wrong. And now she's here in Nowheresville, living a perceivably unextraordinary life. This is Maxine's greatest fear, to be ordinary, to be no one. Should I do an impression of I'm a star? On the flip side, Pearl's obsession with Maxine shows her desperation for a young body, a body that in this case was literally once hers. Being aware of Mia Goth's dual role adds a strange tension to the scenes in which Pearl indecently touches Maxine's body at various points in the film. The two characters create one wasted life. Maxine looking forward with fear, and Pearl looking back with envy and regret. And sadly, that's not the only problem under Pearl's belt. Literally under her belt. Because that's where genitals are. So along with her own age and appearance getting in the way of her unlived dreams, Howard, her veteran hubby, provides another roadblock to happiness. They can't have sex anymore for fear of his heart giving out. The old get a boner and you die game. I bet Jigsaw wished he'd thought of that one. The film's kills, mostly enacted by Pearl by way of pitchfork, alligator, and shotgun, could be interpreted as either a replacement for physical sex that allows Pearl to still feel a thrill once in a while, or as revenge taken on the young Horn crew for not only being able to act on their salacious desires, but for flaunting them. Shortly after arriving on the farm, Wayne makes light of their elderly hosts, saying their sour attitude is likely due to jealousy and failing to consider his own ineptitude. In general, Wayne seems to feel little shame for deceitfully using the farmhouse for their own gain. But for all its grey morality, we're not rooting against Wayne and his crew either. Where slashers often present a bevy of unlikable 20-somethings, oiled and ready for the kill, the character deaths in X act as a gut punch to the audience rather than an inevitability that we wait for with glee. In typical horror fashion, they broke the rules, they had sex, and that means you have to die. But along with their saucy antics, and trust me, we see a lot of their saucy antics, the characters are often shown as kind, well-meaning, and well-rounded people, with almost all of them dying while looking for or attempting to help someone else. But despite its bevy of gory deaths and bountiful nudity amongst the younger cast, one of the most standout aspects of X is the way the film embraces the bodies of its two oldest characters. Throughout the film, Pearl makes desperate attempts to seduce Howard, putting on a full face of colourful makeup, dancing for him and begging him to just let her touch him, which he resists for most of the runtime. As with many young people, especially more attractive people, for so many of us, our self-esteem is linked to desirability. And it's really heartbreaking to see Pearl unable to feel like she's desirable again. And Howard does still seem to want her and want to, but his fears around his health are genuine. Eventually, however, he gives in, and in what I think is an excellent choice on West's part, when the inevitable sexy time takes place between Howard and Pearl, their elderly bodies are used as any younger actors would in an intimate scene. It is nothing theoretically more shocking or sexual than anything we've seen so far. But the way this act has been received by audiences is entirely different from the earlier shots of plump thighs, perky breasts, and soft, hairless skin. And it's this reception to the standout scene in the film which tells us the most about what we, as the audience, fear. The sex between Pearl and Howard shows us what's to come. And it's not like Ty West was unaware of how this would be received. He's not innocent of exploitation here, but he's still ultimately only turning the mirror back on us. Disappointingly, hordes of user reviews on the popular film rating app Letterboxd joked about the sexual nature of the elderly couple in the film. The likes of "Old people scare me too," "Old women in horror equals the creepiest horror," and "Nothing scarier than sex-obsessed, ugly-ass old people." And as far as I'm concerned, even if these viewers think they're being funny or ironic, the joke is still being made at the expense of older people with sexual needs by young people with the same sexual needs. I was genuinely kind of disgusted to read so many comments that degraded these elderly bodies, especially given that most people are acutely aware of the fact that aging is a constant and inescapable process. It happens to all of us. It felt like something I might have found gross or amusing as a 13 or 14-year-old, but these jokes are being made by adults who you would have hoped have more empathy by now. So why do people make these jokes so flippantly? Why do we think we are different? Why, like Maxine, do we think we're special and unlike the elderly who have come before us, who were also once young and beautiful, that we might escape the gripes of age? In a slightly more self-aware statement, Karsten Runker states, "At a certain age, having missionary sex with your bag of bones husband is considered a horror scene." And that's the cruel reality West shines a light on here. 8 gruesome deaths and still a sexually active older couple is the most shocking image in the film. And sure, Howard and Pearl are murderers and may even have a few non-consenting slaves here or there, but West makes an intentional effort to provide dimension and context so as not to demonize our elderly antagonists. X doesn't intend to present them as purely mad old people, as the hagsploitation genre often does. There is nuance and sensitivity to their motive, which under examination is heartbreaking. Aging is inescapable, and that is both the true horror of X and the mirror it holds to its audience. It's hard not to empathize, even with the horrific act it results in, with Pearl's emotional journey as she loses her desirability. And our young protagonists, though innocent of any real crimes and for the most part intelligent and kind, are not so innocent of ageism either. But youth is a bizarre thing to be proud of when we're all headed for the same fragile fate.
So X may be a sloppy, nasty, bloody romp, but it has a soon-to-stop-beating heart of gold. And ironically, for a film embracing the simplicity of your average slasher, it's so much more than your average slasher. It's confidently on the nose and quietly complex at the same time, asking in a whisper, why are we more comfortable watching tanned and taut bodies be torn to bits than watching elderly expressions of sexual desire? So does X itself live up to RJ's aspiration and prove that it is possible to make a good, dirty movie? Fuck yeah. This is so obscene.